I was 13 the first time I heard someone knock from the other side of the basement door. The sound came at exactly 11:43 p.m., 3 slow knocks, spaced perfectly apart. Knock, knock, knock. My father was sitting across from me in the living room watching television when it happened. The moment the sound echoed through the house, he muted the TV so fast it was almost a reflex. Then he looked directly toward the hallway that led to the basement stairs. Neither of us spoke. The knocking didn't come again. After nearly 30 seconds of silence, my father stood up, walked over, and closed the hallway door leading to the basement. He locked it. Then he returned to the couch and continued watching television as if nothing had happened. I remember asking him what the noise was. He stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. Old houses make sounds, but his hands were shaking. The basement door became a rule after that. Not a normal household rule like taking out trash or cleaning your room. It was different, specific, serious. My father sat me down the next morning and spoke carefully. Never open the basement door after dark. I laughed because it sounded ridiculous. Why? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the kitchen window as though checking something outside. Because sometimes you'll hear things down there. Like what? He hesitated. Things that know your name. I thought he was joking. Looking back, I wish he had been. Our house sat alone at the edge of a small town surrounded by woods. It wasn't particularly old, maybe 50 years at most. The basement itself was unfinished concrete with storage shelves, old furniture, and a furnace that sounded like a truck engine whenever it started. Nothing unusual. During the day, I went down there all the time. But after that conversation, I started noticing things. The basement door remained locked every night. My father checked it before bed, sometimes twice. Whenever storms rolled through, he checked 3 times. And every now and then, usually close to midnight, I heard faint sounds drifting upward from below. Footsteps, soft movement, the occasional knock. Always 3 knocks, never more, never less. At first, I convinced myself it was the furnace, pipes, the house settling. Then one night I heard my name. It was faint, almost too faint to be certain. I was lying in bed around midnight when a voice drifted up through the floorboards beneath me. Ethan. Just once, calm, quiet, familiar somehow. I sat upright immediately. The house remained silent afterward, no footsteps, no movement, nothing. The next morning I told my father. His face turned pale. Did it sound like somebody you know? He asked. I thought about it. Maybe. That answer seemed to upset him more than if I'd said yes. After that, he added another rule. Never answer if you hear your name. That should have been enough to convince me something was wrong. But I was 13. Curiosity outweighed common sense. The more rules appeared, the more I wanted answers. Why was the basement different after dark? Why did my father act terrified whenever storms arrived? Why did he keep an extra lock on the basement door despite living alone with a teenager in the middle of nowhere? The answers never came directly. Instead, small details accumulated. Every night before locking the basement, my father left a glass of water on the top stair. Every morning it was empty. I asked about it once. He claimed it was for humidity. Even at 13, I knew that explanation made no sense. Another strange thing involved photographs. There were no family pictures taken inside the house before I was born. Plenty afterward, none before. Whenever I asked why, my father changed the subject. Then I found an old photograph hidden inside a kitchen drawer. The picture showed our house 20 years earlier. My father stood on the front porch beside another man who looked almost identical to him. Same face, same eyes, same build. On the back, someone had written a single word: "Don't." I showed the photograph to my father that evening. He stared at it for nearly a minute. Then he quietly took it from my hands and threw it into the fireplace. I never saw it again. "Who was that?" I asked. "My brother." "I didn't know you had a brother." He looked toward the basement door. "Most people don't." That was all he said. Summer passed. The knocking continued every few weeks, always 3 knocks, always after dark. Then came the storm, the one that changed everything. It arrived late in October. Wind howled through the trees, hard enough to shake the windows. Rain hammered the roof all evening. Around 11 o'clock, the power failed. The entire house went dark. My father lit several candles and locked every door, not just the basement, every door in the house. Then he sat in the living room staring toward the hallway, waiting. "What's wrong?" I asked. He didn't answer. At exactly 11:43 p.m., the knocking started. Knock, knock, knock. Louder than usual. The sound echoed through the floorboards beneath us. Another 3 knocks followed immediately, then another. It felt like someone standing directly behind the basement door. My father stood up. "Stay here." He disappeared into the hallway carrying a flashlight. I followed despite being told not to. The basement door stood at the end of the hall. The extra lock remained secured. My father pressed one hand against the wood and closed his eyes. The knocking stopped instantly. Silence filled the house. Then a voice spoke from the other side. "David." My father's name. I remember the look on his face, not fear, recognition, like hearing from someone he hadn't seen in years. The voice continued. "It's cold down here." My father remained silent. "David." Another pause. "Open the door." Every hair on my arms stood up. The voice sounded normal, friendly even, like a relative asking for help. My father whispered something too quiet for me to hear. Then he stepped back. The voice laughed softly, not cruelly, almost sadly. "You still believe that story?" My father grabbed my shoulder and pulled me away immediately. We spent the rest of the night upstairs. Neither of us slept. The next morning, he called in sick to work. Around noon, he finally told me part of the truth. Not all of it, just enough. He explained that when he was young, he had a twin brother named Daniel. They looked identical, sounded identical, finished each other's sentences. Then something happened during a storm when they were 17. Daniel went into the basement after dark. He never came back out. Search teams looked for weeks. Nothing, no evidence, no explanation. He simply disappeared. Years later, strange things began happening. Knocking, voices, footsteps beneath the house. At first, my grandparents believed Daniel somehow survived. Then they started hearing him call from behind the basement door. My grandfather eventually sealed the original basement entrance and installed a new one. The voices continued anyway. "That's impossible," I said. My father nodded slowly. "I know." "Then what is it?" He looked toward the hallway. "I don't know." The story should have scared me enough to stop asking questions. Instead, it made everything worse. Because now I had a mystery. A twin brother who vanished. Voices from below. Decades of fear without explanation. I started paying closer attention. The voice beneath the basement door always knew personal things. Sometimes it mentioned old family memories. Sometimes it used phrases only relatives would recognize. Once it sang part of a song my grandmother used to sing to my father as a child. Details nobody else should know. Yet something always felt slightly wrong, like an actor performing a role after studying it too carefully. Then came the first major mistake. One evening I was home alone while my father worked late. Around 11:43 p.m., 3 knocks sounded from the basement. I ignored them. Another 3 followed. Then silence. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" Static crackled softly. Then a familiar voice spoke. "Ethan?" My stomach dropped. It sounded exactly like my father. "Dad?" Silence, then the voice laughed softly. "Not quite." The line disconnected immediately. I didn't sleep that night. When my father returned home, I told him everything. He sat quietly for several minutes before speaking. "It's getting closer." "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. That became another pattern. The closer I got to understanding, the less my father explained. Winter arrived early that year. Snow covered the woods surrounding our property. Activity increased dramatically. Voices became more frequent. Sometimes I heard conversations beneath the floor after midnight. 2 people talking quietly. One voice always sounded like Daniel. The other never stayed the same. Sometimes it sounded like strangers. Sometimes neighbors. Once, horrifyingly, it sounded like me. I began keeping notes, dates, times, weather conditions, every incident. The pattern became obvious almost immediately. Storms mattered. Heavy rain, snowstorms, strong wind. Activity always intensified during bad weather. One night I found my father sitting beside the basement door at 2 a.m. He held an old photograph in his hands. The picture showed him and Daniel as teenagers standing beside a lake. "Do you ever think it's really him?" I asked. My father stared at the photo for a long time. "Every day." "Then why not open the door?" He looked at me with an expression I'll never forget. "Because if it is him, he already knows I won't." That answer haunted me. Months passed. Curiosity slowly transformed into obsession. I started researching missing persons cases, local legends, newspaper archives. Eventually, I discovered something strange. Our house wasn't the first one built on that land. A farmhouse stood there decades earlier. According to old articles, the family living there reported hearing voices beneath the property during storms. The farmhouse burned down under mysterious circumstances. The replacement house was built directly above the same foundation. I showed the articles to my father. He read them silently. Then he nodded as though confirming something he'd always suspected. "There's more, isn't there?" I asked. "A lot more." "Then tell me." He looked exhausted, older than I'd ever seen him. "Some things survive because people keep talking about them." That wasn't an answer, yet somehow it felt important. The following autumn, my father became ill. Nothing dramatic, just tired, distracted. He spent more time sitting near the basement door, listening, waiting. One evening, he handed me a key I'd never seen before. Heavy brass, worn with age. "If something happens to me," he said, "don't use this." "What does it unlock?" "The second lock." My stomach tightened. I hadn't even known there was another lock. He pointed toward a small wooden panel hidden behind a bookshelf in the hallway. Inside sat an old metal mechanism connected to the basement door, a backup lock, older than the house itself. "Why would I need it?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he repeated the same instruction. Never open the basement door after dark. A week later, he left town for a business trip. It was the first time I'd stayed alone in the house. That night, a storm arrived. Around 11:43 p.m., the knocking started. 3 knocks, then 3 more, then silence. I ignored it. 5 minutes passed. Another knock. Just one, then a voice. My father's voice. "Ethan." I froze. The voice sounded frightened, desperate. "Ethan, open the door." My heart pounded. "Dad?" Silence, then another response. "I'm stuck." Every instinct told me something was wrong. Yet the voice sounded exactly like him. "Dad?" I repeated. "Please." The word barely rose above a whisper. I stood in the hallway, staring at the basement door. The key felt heavy in my pocket. Another knock sounded. Soft. Weak. "I'm cold." My hand moved toward the lock. Then I remembered something, a question my father always asked whenever he returned from a trip. Same question every time. I swallowed hard. "What's Mom's favorite song?" Silence answered. Several seconds passed. Then the voice laughed, slowly, patiently. The sound no longer resembled my father at all. "Good," it said. "He taught you that one." Footsteps retreated downward into darkness. I didn't move for a long time afterward. My father returned safely the next day. When I told him what happened, he looked relieved. Not surprised. Relieved. Like he'd been expecting a test. Years passed. I eventually moved away. College, work, life. My father remained in that house. The basement door remained locked. We rarely discussed it anymore. Then, 5 years ago, I received a phone call at 11:43 p.m. My father's number. "Dad?" I answered. Static filled the line. Then his voice spoke softly. "I'm tired." Something about the way he said it unsettled me immediately. "Are you okay?" Silence, then a different voice answered. "Not yet." The call disconnected. I drove to the house the following morning. My father sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee. Perfectly normal. Yet something felt different. He seemed older. Smaller somehow. He listened carefully while I described the phone call. Then he nodded. It finally stopped asking. What stopped asking? He glanced toward the basement door. "The thing down there. What does it want?" My father looked at me for a long time. "A replacement." Neither of us spoke afterward. He died 2 years later. Natural causes. Peacefully. Before the funeral, I returned to the house alone to sort through belongings. The basement door remained exactly where it had always been. Locked, silent, forgotten. Or so I thought. Around sunset, I heard 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed through the empty house. My chest tightened. Then came a voice, familiar, calm, my father's voice. "Ethan." I closed my eyes. The voice continued, "Don't stay after dark." For the first time in my life, the words didn't sound like a request to open the door. They sounded like a warning. I left immediately. The house was sold 6 months later. A new family moved in. I never told them about the basement. Sometimes I wonder if I should have. Then again, maybe they already know. Last winter, I drove past the property during a storm. The house looked unchanged. Snow covered the yard. Warm light glowed through the windows. As I passed, I noticed a man standing inside near the hallway, watching the basement door. Even from the road, his posture looked familiar, tired, patient, waiting. For a moment, I almost stopped the car. Then I remembered the final thing my father ever told me. Some doors aren't meant to keep things in. They're meant to keep things from learning you're still there. So I kept driving. Yet every year when storms arrive and the wind rattles my windows around 11:43 p.m., I still find myself listening, waiting for 3 slow knocks from somewhere below. And on the worst nights, just before sleep, I think I hear a voice beneath the floorboards saying my name exactly the way my father used to. Calm, familiar, almost convincing, almost